Hello, I'm Colleen Gallagher, CEO at Onward and Upward, and you're listening to the Association Insights podcast, where each week we interview association leaders from across the country to hear how they're trying new things, taking big risks, and delivering value for their members. We'll explore the realities of what it means to work in and with associations and bring you the insights and inspiration you need to advance your career and make big changes at your association. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Association Insights podcast. I'm your host, Megan Henning, and if you've been tuning in as part of the Association 100 audience, well, you're in the right place. Same great content, fresh new name. We'll still be bringing you expert perspectives, actionable takeaways, and dynamic conversations to help you elevate your association's communications, advocacy, and leadership strategies. Today, we're launching our advocacy series with Tuck Shumack, a principal at OGR, a bipartisan government relations firm. With more than 25 years of experience in the public and private sectors, Tuck is a lobbyist and consultant with a long and successful track record of advising corporations, trade associations, and coalitions on government relations, tax policy, and trade. While representing both foreign and domestic business, he has experience in working with globally headquartered companies. His political and public policy experience includes serving as tax and finance counsel to Senator Olympio Snowe of Maine and the Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship. In his work with the committee, Tuck was involved in negotiating the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act of 2008, the Economic Stimulus Act of 2008, and the Small Business and Work Opportunity Tax Act of 2007. He also served as a legislative assistant for Congressman and then Senator Johnny Isakson of Georgia and legislative assistant for the late Senator Paul Coverdell of Georgia, handling a variety of issues, including agriculture, tax, foreign affairs, and defense. Tuck holds a Master of Laws in Taxation from Southern Methodist University, a law degree from the University of Richmond, a Bachelor of Arts from Hampton-Sydney College. He's also a great all-around guy and a good friend of mine. So welcome, Tuck. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Megan. Always good to talk to you.
So let's start at the beginning of your advocacy career. You have over 25 years of experience in public policy and government relations. Tell us what drew you to advocacy work and how your background in Congress has shaped your approach as a lobbyist.
Yeah, thanks, and great question. Quite honestly, I get asked by I talk to a lot of students who are still in college and thinking about their next steps and ask me, hey, I want to be a lobbyist just like you. And I tell all of them, and this was how I came to be you shouldn't come to Washington to be a lobbyist or an advocate. You should come to Washington because you want to be part of, you really care about policy and politics and want to be part of the process. And so what drew me here was I wanted to work either in the White House or Capitol Hill because I wanted to be part of the process. I had become sort of a political nerd. And, at some point, I wanted to take the next step in my career. And being an advocate, being a lobbyist, working downtown allowed me to continue to be part of the process. I think it's not as enough said and understood that we are part of the process, and we like to see the process moving forward, and sometimes are doing a lot behind the scenes to help make that happen. It's just sort of really it was just the continuation of being part of the political process.
I love that because you do think probably today people are thinking, I want to be a lobbyist, but to start even before that, to just say you want to be part of this whole process, this political process is I feel like very good advice. So OGR is known for its bipartisan approach and collaborative team structure. How does this model help your clients, particularly any associations, succeed in Washington?
Yeah, I think in a couple of different respects. One is continuity. The political pendulum swings quite a bit and quite often, and I think the last election just showed that, going from a President Biden to a President Trump. again, which is just another example of the
Yes.
pendulum, how often the pendulum swings, right, from one direction to the other. And so going with the bipartisan firm, if you choose, I'm going to go with an all Republican firm right now. Well, in just a matter of 2 to 4 years, the politics of Washington can change all over again, and you're back in search of another group to come help you, perhaps from the other side of the aisle. So we provide a lot of continuity regardless of the political situation, which also helps us and helps the client have a firm that they work with that has institutional knowledge about the existing client and where they've been. We didn't just start with them at the start of this Congress, right? We've been with you for several years. And then the other thing that I would add is, regardless of the makeup, right now both houses of Congress and the administration are both Republican, right? But the Senate still has a filibuster. Democrats will have at some point a say in the legislative process, and so it's important to remember that, because they haven't just gone away. They're not in a hole. They are still part of the process. And going with a bipartisan firm, within our firm, we communicate quite a bit. We have a call every single morning where we discuss clients and what's going on in Congress. And so that gives us not just the perspective of one party, but the perspective of both parties, and kind of gives us a more of a complete picture. So I may be a Republican, but when I'm talking to a client, I have the benefit of having the perspective of some of my colleagues who are on the Democratic side, and understanding how any one issue is playing on both sides of the aisle, and how we can advise you to go forward.
That's a good point. And since we are literally days into the new administration, what changes or challenges are you anticipating in the advocacy landscape?
Yeah, this administration is an interesting one, right? It's a lot much more populist than say the Republican fold of previous days and the Reagan years and so forth. So that's going to present, and particularly in the business communities, let's say, both opportunities and challenges. There's going to be times when this administration is in direct opposition of a particular concern, but then there's also going to be a lot of opportunities. And so it does present in this interesting mix of how can you work through the challenges without negating your opportunity to work with the administration or Congress on some of the opportunities that you have.
That's good advice. I mean, we have a lot of listeners. Our listeners are mostly association professionals, and we have people with really huge budgets and people with really small budgets. How can associations best prepare to navigate these shifts effectively?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I think one, really, really dig in and try to understand, like, where you're being presented with challenges. Whoever it is, whether it's the administration and Congress, Democrats or Republicans in Congress, or whoever it is that is presenting the challenge, really do your research and due diligence, and try to understand where they're coming from, so you can speak to them directly, rather than just saying how any particular issue or action is hurting your interest or concerning you in some way. Understanding where they're coming from, and if you're able to do that, then you're probably able to better communicate a message that resonates with them more, and hopefully find ways to either mitigate the damage or find some resolution, some middle ground that where both parties could find a win.
Right. That's good advice too. I mean, finding the middle ground, I think, is probably key. And it's, always important to build relationships in a new political climate. So, what advice do you have for associations looking to establish or even rebuild relationships with policymakers, particularly in an administration that differs significantly from their past advocacy priorities?
Yeah, and this is always a fun one. I mean, again, one, going back to what I just said, understanding where they're coming from is absolutely critical in acknowledging that, because quite often you may still ultimately disagree with their solution or where their stance, but you may say, well, I can see where, all right, now I get it. I understand where they're coming from. And once you're able to do that and you can acknowledge the differences, what I would stress is to think creatively how you can work with them, things that you can do to be helpful in terms of, we can offer you site visits and so forth. Because, whether it's a member of Congress or a senior official in the administration or the president himself, they do like to get out and they like to get people, they like to be seen. And these are things that you can be helpful with. You're trying to think creatively how you um, how you can help them. It may not be issue oriented, like I'm just saying. It may be offering them an opportunity to be seen out in the community, and that in turn may not solve your problem immediately, but it does allow you to open up a dialogue and establish a relationship.
Yeah, I think that's important too, to really, to remember to be creative, right? A lot of times we get up and we do the same thing over and over and over again. And you kind of forget that there's a new administration and you do need to be sort of thinking outside maybe of your own box. Aside from the creativity, what are some key strategies that associations should focus on to ensure their advocacy efforts are like impactful, especially in today's fast-paced and very polarized political environment?
Yeah, and I'm probably just going to sound like a broken record here, but know who you're talking to. An advocacy organization. Sometimes if you do your homework, and let's say you're going into a member of the House of Representatives, some congressman or congresswoman's office, with a little bit of research, you might find that they may have a connection. Let's say you're the Alzheimer's Association. You may find that they have a parent or a grandparent who went through this and has a family experience with whatever issue that you're working with. So trying to get to know them, because you may be surprised that there's a personal connection to whatever it is that you're talking to. And once you establish that, it really helps ease a conversation with whoever it is.
That's true. And I hope our listeners are really listening to do their homework, because that's an excellent example that I think would be so beneficial and like, it's sort of close to your own heart where that you're, working with that. I think that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say, like, when I go in to meet with a staff or not even a member of Congress, a staff person, I quite often look at their background and see where they went to college, and quite often I have some connection to the college and know someone that did, and I try to begin the conversation with making a personal connection.
I think that's so true. That's great advice. So when should associations consider partnering with a lobbying firm?
I think, again, one, if a lobbying firm offers broader reach, an association has limited budgets, and there's only so many people, hands and legs they can accommodate in one particular office. And so bringing on a lobbying firm, one, just gives them hands and legs. It also will give the association, I think, associations, typically have, unless it's a very broad association, I'm thinking of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce or the Business Roundtable and some of these business that represent a whole host of types of businesses. But, but a lot of associations have a very narrow focus, and sometimes a lobbying firm, particularly one that has a, itself doesn't necessarily have like we handle a whole range of issues. We have energy clients, we have healthcare clients, we have financial services clients. So, we help, we cover a lot of ground. And so sometimes having a perspective that isn't necessarily pigeonholed into the area that can be helpful, because sometimes other issue areas creep into yours and you're unaware of it because you're so focused on that. So, I think, the arms and legs is an obvious one, the broader focus. And then, of course, there are firms that, and we have particular expertise. Other firms have particular expertise or relationships that they can offer that perhaps, an association doesn't necessarily have internally, but but need at any particular time to add to their advocacy toolkit.
Yeah, I mean, having worked myself at multiple associations, and we've had, we partnered with lobbying firms. A lot of times I feel like we didn't utilize them to the best of our ability. We would utilize them for the yearly fly-in, for example, but then there are 364 other days there. So how can associations make the most of their partnerships with lobbying firms?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you from what we generally advocate for with interacting with our clients is regular communication. You do see in terms of some of the clients I've worked with over the years where they tend to prefer just to work with you, reach out to you when they actually need you. Um, and I really think that they aren't getting their best bang for the buck. And having regular communication, a regular call, it could be weekly, it could be monthly, but something somewhat regular so that we're hearing everything that your association is concerned with, and it may surprise the association that we may have some knowledge or perspective, something that can help them. And I would also, when you're making plans, you're looking through your year plan. I think that is a great time to, too often, I think we lobbying firms that you partner with really can inform that longer term thinking process if you bring them into the picture rather than going through it afterwards and having your firm say, well, why did you do that? And perhaps if you had talked to me, maybe we would have done something differently. And I've had that happen plenty of times, and the client say, well, gosh, I wish I had thought of that.
Right. Right. And I think the other thing that, you tell me, but it's not as if you contract with a lobbying firm on a particular issue that it's possible at all times to get it resolved within a year. I mean, I think there are lots of different ideas or goals that associations have that it's multiple years, and they need the planning of that. Like, this will never just happen within a year, or even maybe in an administration, that you need to lay the groundwork, and that needs to come into associations like timelines, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. Most things don't get done very quickly. And I do think, associations need to be realistic. And some of that is member management, right? Their own members are very excited or anxious to see an immediate result. But the political process, the legislative process, the regulatory process is cumbersome in this country, and intentionally is so. And so there needs to be a patience and understanding that things can take some time. And there's a lot of some of what we've talked about, relationship building, that needs to happen over time before you see a more tangible result.
Right. So it sounds like it's an investment. It's an investment in time and in energy and in picking the right firm, and not, and maybe looking for a bipartisan firm. With speaking of that, I feel like this one is one of the hardest things, again, having worked in an association, to tell members. The measuring the success of your advocacy efforts is so hard, right? Unless, like, if you're looking to pass a bill and you didn't get the bill passed, it makes it look like, well, what have you been doing, right? So what metrics or indicators do you recommend associations use to track their effectiveness? Because there are so many things that are being done on a daily basis that will lead you to eventual success, but not immediate success.
Yeah, that's a great question, and metrics are real. And this is what I'm thinking of a corporate client. It makes it so hard for the Washington office talking to their headquarters, in that you can't measure everything in dollars and cents and immediate tangible. So some of the things we've seen associations do is have relationship trackers, right? And people run through all the members that they would hope to and should probably have a relationship with, and kind of have a scoring system, in terms of how deep of the relationship or good relationship that they have. And that is certainly one to make sure that so that way you see this congressman or congresswoman, we probably don't have the greatest relationship. We need to focus on that. And because I think over time, if you have the better and the deeper and the more relationships you have, the more success you're going to have. And of course, there's always depending on what you're working on, there's the metric of simply getting a bill. I think people, if whatever you're advocating for requires legislation, sometimes getting a bill introduced is not as easy as it might seem. So having a bill introduced, how many co-sponsors you might have in supporting that, because if you can demonstrate to House or Senate leadership that a particular bill has a great deal of support across a breadth of both Republicans and Democrats, and with very geographic diversity and philosophical diversity, you're really setting yourself up for success in the long term.
Yeah, I like those ideas. And I think that will be able to help, within associations to be able to say, here are the steps we are taking. I've been in an association where people are excited that we finally get a meeting, let alone introduce something. We made the first step. And I think sometimes board members might not fully appreciate sort of the rigmarole that you have to go through in DC to do this. So looking ahead, what trends or emerging issues should associations be aware of in the coming years to stay ahead in their advocacy efforts?
Yeah, that's always a challenging issue. Just thinking broadly for associations and not knowing which anyone may have. But I mean, to me, the difference in the way people are getting their news today, including congressional staffers, it's not your traditional source of news always. It's not I may be one of the last dinosaurs that actually gets an actual newspaper every day and reads it. Social media is a lot more important. So sometimes social media campaigns are a lot more effective than they have been in the past. And just thematically, I think both parties right now are really searching to how to win the hearts and minds of the working class American, and trying to fit your advocacy efforts into that theme is always helpful, depending on what you're working for. And I think just making and also there is an increased sense of nationalism and talking about whatever it is that you're working for is helping the country, is whether it's the economy or its health, physical health of its citizens or what have you, is increasingly more and more important. I mean, always is important, but is more of a focus.
Okay. And what is one piece of advice you'd offer to association leaders who want to strengthen their organization's influence in Washington during this upcoming administration?
Yeah, one of the best association leaders that I've seen and worked with, who I won't name, but he always stressed to never forget that we are an advocacy organization first. And I think a lot of times that can be forgotten, surprisingly, and because there's a lot of programming that an association may do, and it's a lot more concerned about bringing in a next speaker for this and that. But at the end of the day, if the results aren't going to be there, the members aren't going to be happy if they get bad, policy results. So just not losing sight of that.
That's great. So before we let you go, we wrap up every podcast with a couple questions. So, and it's just for fun, just to let our audience get to know you. So first one, have you gotten to get away to anywhere fun lately?
Well, yeah, probably the most fun place I have in the just recent history, not in the past couple of weeks, but over Thanksgiving, I did get to go to Hawaii to see my beloved Auburn Tigers, even though I didn't go to Auburn. I had a lot of family and grew up a big Auburn fan, and named after an Auburn football player. And they were playing in the Maui Invitational basketball tournament in Hawaii. So that was a lot of fun.
How totally fun. Yes. And besides, of course, this podcast, what podcasts are you listening to that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, one podcast that I like to listen to is Hacks on Tap. I like to be a bipartisan thing. I like to hear people from both sides and perspectives. And Hacks on Tap has prominent Republicans and Democrats on it, and kind of looking at things from more of the political campaign lens. But they go through a lot of policy issues, and it's good to hear discussion from people with different views and how they see any particular issue. It's in front of Washington at one time.
That's great. What's one place in the U.S. that you've never been but are dying to go?
I would say that would be Alaska.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I would like to go there too. All right, finish the sentence. When you see me looking at my phone, it probably means that I'm...
Oh gosh, I really probably shouldn't reveal that. I am... this is one, Megan, you may be aware, that also has my eye of my wife, but Candy Crush.
Yes, I did know that. I love it. Well, Tuck, thank you so much. This was so great. I really feel like our listeners are getting like a really big peek into, how to handle the next 4 years and their advocacy efforts. And I just think this has been great. It's always great to see you.
Great. Well, this has been a fun discussion. Always good to talk to you. And thanks for having me.
Thanks.
That's a wrap for today's episode. The Association Insights Podcast, previously known as the Association 100 Podcast, is a production of Onward and Upward Marketing and Communications, where our mission is to make associations and nonprofits the go-to source in their industries through earned media and thought leadership. This podcast is an extension of our newsletter, a bi-monthly collection of best practices, top trends, helpful ideas, and smart strategies delivered straight to your inbox. Have you undertaken a big change at your association? Or do you have some words of wisdom from the trenches of association life? We want to hear from you, and so do our listeners. Drop us a note at info@onwardupward.com. That's info@onwrdupwrd.com. Be sure to subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and share with your friends and colleagues. We're available anywhere podcasts are found. Come back next week for more association insights and inspiration. Thanks for tuning in.